Hey, so I'm here with our Chief Legal Counsel, Barry Arrington. Barry is representing us on all 7 of the lawsuits we filed to overturn semi-auto bans and magazine bans, standard capacity magazine bans all across the United States. And we're actually here in New Haven, Connecticut today because we had our first court hearing in our lawsuit to overturn Connecticut's semi-auto ban. So that was a long hearing, Barry, about 2 hours at least. So how do you feel like that went?
It was a long hearing, and there was a lot of briefing involved, hundreds of pages of briefs and exhibits. And the thing is, the state, and I told this to the judge, the state is hiring all these experts and putting in literally hundreds of pages of paper into the court's file. And I said, look, Judge, it's a simple case. Millions of Americans own these for lawful purposes. Case closed. I said that in the court today. And you know why I said that? Because that's what Justice Thomas and Justice Scalia said in their Friedman dissent. They said it's just that simple, that if you have millions of Americans owning these AR-15 platform rifles for lawful purposes, which we proved that they did, under our precedents, that is all that is necessary for them to be protected by the Second Amendment.
Which I thought was really interesting because at the very end, the other side made the point, made the outrageous claim. So this is not about the will of the American people. This is about, you know, what did they call it? An extreme minority that just wants to own these weapons. And how can you characterize America's most popular firearm as an extreme minority?
So the context of that quote was this. I said to the court, it's not the court's choice, it's not the legislature's choice. How do you determine what is protected by the Second Amendment? And the cases say, this is not Barry Arrington, the cases say that it is the choices of the American people that determine what's in common use and therefore what's protected by the Second Amendment. And I was frankly very disturbed and upset when he stood up and said, it's not the choices of the American people. They're a bunch of fringe minority idiots. Well, that's not what Justice Thomas says. It's not what Justice Scalia says. It's not what Justice Kavanaugh says. It's not what Justice Alito says. These weapons are owned by millions and millions of law-abiding citizens, and they are protected by the Second Amendment.
And that was actually, that kind of gets to one of the things that I really noticed that I thought you did really well. It is about what the justices themselves have said in their own words in these cases, but the judge kept trying to get you to go off script and insert your own opinion. And you were like, nope, this is what they said. It's not my opinion.
That's exactly right. I get this from time to time from judges. Actually, in the last 3 cases that I've argued, the judge has said, so in your opinion, Mr. Arrington, and I keep going back, my opinion is irrelevant. To an extent, your opinion is kind of not relevant either. The justices of the Supreme Court say, and then I quote Justice Thomas and Justice Scalia and Justice Alito and Justice Kavanaugh, all saying that we should win these cases because these weapons are owned by millions of people for lawful uses. And then the state stands up and says, well, they're used for crime too. They're used for mass shootings. And I say to them, wait a minute. You've got a few maniacs committing murders of dozens of people. Does that mean that millions, literally millions of people lose their Second Amendment rights because of what these couple of maniacs have done? As horrific as what they do, the court is very clear about this, and that's what I said to the judge today. As horrific as these things are, the court has made it very clear. We're not going to strip the Second Amendment rights away from millions on account of a few maniacs.
Of all the outrageous things we heard in court today, and there were a lot of them, what did you find the most infuriating?
Actually, the one you just picked up on, when he stood up at the very end, after I'd already had my say and couldn't respond, what the American people choose is not relevant. It's what these people are just a bunch of maniacs, right-wing extremists, he called all the millions of Americans who own these weapons, and that's their mindset. That they believe they ought to be able, if they could get away with it, they would strip you away of all of your right to self-defense so that only the government would be armed and only criminals would be armed because they don't care what the laws say. But that was the most upsetting.
So when the Supreme Court issued this Bruen ruling, it overturned a lot of really bad gun case law from the lower circuits.
Yes.
But I thought it was really interesting that we didn't hear them pointing that out in court today. In fact, very much the reverse.
That was a very interesting part about the state's case. State of Connecticut files a brief where they make their argument. It's 40 pages long. And they, in that brief, cited 26 times to cases that are, the technical legal term for that is abrogated, made null by Bruen. And they're saying to the court, you could go ahead and keep following these cases that Bruen has abrogated. And even if you're trying to argue that the law is otherwise, that these cases still have continuing authority in some respects, at least you're supposed to notify the court that there's this issue about them being abrogated. The state didn't use the word abrogated in its brief one time. It was continually telling the court, use the cases that have been abrogated, which I thought was
essentially trying to pretend that Bruen didn't happen.
Pretending Bruen didn't happen. The state's case in many respects was a stick your head in the sand sort of a case.
So that's what we got from the Connecticut Attorney General's office here in what's called the Constitution State, which is a real shame. But the Constitution State should have constitutional laws, and that's why we filed this lawsuit. So, Barry, thank you very much for representing us and our members so well in court today. And if y'all would like to get involved in the gun rights fight, you can learn more at gunrights.org. And stay tuned for more details on this case and our other 6 lawsuits to end assault weapons bans nationwide.